Just tell me a bit about yourself. Who is Courtney? What does your journey in procurement look like? I saw that you recently started a new position as well.
Yes, that's exciting. A little bit about me is that I actually was born in South Africa. Not many people know that about me because I don't have the thick accent that you'd expect. But we moved when I was quite young, and I've lived in, I think, 3 different countries. So South Africa being my home country, and then I actually lived in Holland for 4 years. Dad, for his work, came over to the UK, and that's kind of where I've been settled for sort of last 20 or so years. And procurement was a bit of an accident, to be honest. It really was a space where I kind of left university. I'd gone into sort of an admin role in a finance company initially. Didn't really enjoy that, and I had a real interest in the automotive industry. So I started looking for roles in that space, and sort of just took a customer service role at an automotive company, and they needed a bit of a hand in procurement, so I thought, oh, I'll get involved with that. It really got me into the thick of procurement pretty quickly. I was quite curious to then go and look into what procurement meant end to end, and what kind of value it can generate for businesses. So completely different to my degree. I've got a bachelor's degree in dance, which again, people don't really know about. So I did ballet and contemporary for 3 years, which was amazing. And I danced actually from the age of 5 right up until I left university. So yeah, that's kind of a fun fact about me. Over the course of my career, pieces of work that I really enjoyed was working at AB Sports Nutrition as category manager there. I think that's a role where I really got into sort of in-depth strategy in terms of category management and commodities, and how those kind of influence the outcomes that you have in terms of buying and cost and quality. And really I can attribute that to having a really supportive manager that kind of just gave me free rein to kind of go out and look at what kind of strategy I wanted to build around that. Head of procurement at EVC, which is now Rome. I'd cultivated all of this experience over sort of 8 or 9 years, and really kind of put some bigger boots on for myself, let's say, and kind of got into a real space where I had kind of freedom of design in terms of what we were going to do with process and policy, and operationally how procurement was going to fit into that, and building a team there as well. Obviously, my new role at AllPoints Fibre, which I'm so excited about. Stuart is fantastic and such a great leader, and the team that he's built there is incredible as well. And then all the work that I do with Procurement League as well is definitely a career highlight.
What does your ambassadorship entail exactly?
It was sort of just as we were going into COVID times, right? So I've been made redundant, and it was really for me a sort of but kind of bettering my knowledge as well as kind of being made redundant, making sure I was staying informed with market insights and that kind of thing. And Procurement League were trying to build a community, a global community really, of procurement professionals, and now they've grown to, I think it's 40,000 globally, which is fantastic. But initially the incentive really was to just cultivate a network of procurement professionals, get people talking to each other and sharing their knowledge base. And a lot of what we tried to do was cultivate people who are kind of industry experts who could then share their knowledge with the wider procurement networks. We're expanding our work into sort of content generation for procurement professionals. They have moved along in terms of their service offering, which is great. It's great to see them growing.
You have founded your own consultancy. So what has that looked like in these early months?
The consultancy really was born out of probably quite a difficult time for me, having been made redundant. And I'd been on the job market for a while, kind of looking for the right people first and foremost, the right kind of business that I wanted to work for, and the right kind of category area as well. So and I thought, the consultancy side of things, I think lent well to my capabilities. I've worked in multiple markets in different category areas, and I just thought, well, I might as well take the bull by the horns and do it myself. In terms of consultancy in the wider space and what it can do for businesses, I think it really offers an opportunity for consultancies or consultants to educate the business as to the value that procurement can give. If they're not ready to give procurement a table at their C-suite, and they want to get somebody externally to come in just to show them, then maybe that's the right building blocks for them to actually make a wedge of space for procurement to come in the future. So that's the way I see kind of procurement consultancy helping businesses moving forward who perhaps aren't necessarily there yet.
And I did a bit of stalking, and
we all do. It's fine.
You mentioned women have to navigate different priorities to reach leadership, and that hit close to home. If you don't mind me asking, Could you share why and some of the lessons that you have learned along the way as a woman in procurement?
So I think it's a bit of a controversial one. And there was a Women in Procurement talk at Procurement and Supply Chain Live, which was fantastic. And, it was great to see women in leadership in procurement. But they touched on this topic of, different priorities for women. And I'll be honest, it struck a nerve a little bit with me because I just thought, whether you're a man or a woman, you have different priorities. And I don't think that should stagnate your career progression. We've kind of stereotyped women into being focused on children and the household, and therefore they'll take a career break to prioritise that. And that's the reason why they might not progress as rapidly, which I think I can't swear, so is not accurate. And if I look at kind of my priorities in life, I'm 30 next year, and my priorities are definitely not children and settling down. My priorities are my career, and I'm just in a different stage of life. So I think it struck a nerve really for me when they were talking about our priorities are the reason why, because men have different priorities. If you flip that on its head, there are some men that maybe want to stay at home with their kids and are happy for their wives to go out and progress in their careers. So it was a bit of a tricky one for me, and I think there's a diverse set of priorities, whether you're a man or a woman, if I'm honest. I'm not a gung-ho feminist, I'm really not. But, there are challenges. For women who are trying to sort of aspire to and want to get into leadership roles, my biggest advice would be just to go for it. A lot of, the stuff that I have done and I have achieved has been off the back of, yes, some very hard work. But equally just having the balls to go for it in the first place. There's that lack of confidence, not in their ability, because I think women know what they can bring to the table, but it's having that voice to evidence and say, look, this is what I can do, because sometimes we can be overpowered. Invest in yourself and your growth, and make sure you're learning and putting yourself in front of people as much as possible. Have the confidence to say no if you're in a negotiation or you're talking to the business about something and you fundamentally don't agree, because you think, there's some risks involved, or from a strategic perspective, it's perhaps not the best way forward. Then be brave and say it, because they'll actually have a lot more respect for you if you say it and you say why, rather than sitting back and never challenging them. Men generally are more sort of pragmatic and I would say logistical, whereas women can really tune into that kind of emotional intelligence side of things, which, we all have our strengths. And I think if you're a woman in procurement, I would say it just plays to your strengths and make sure you're aware of your strengths, they're aware of yours, and vice versa. Whether you're a male or a woman, I think it does come down to, how you work with people. So those would be kind of my top tips for women wanting to get into leadership roles.
I love it. I've also seen that you're a strong advocate of sustainability. Do you think we're currently doing enough? What are your thoughts on that side of things?
I think you made an interesting point in the initial kind of conversations that we had about sustainability, and there's a difference between sustainability sort of 10, 15 years ago to modern sustainability. Initially, I think even for procurement and supply chain professionals, sustainability was kind of an aspirational thing that we wanted to get to. If you were lucky, if you're in a really well-established procurement department, which have got all their ducks in a row, everything's working well, that you could really focus on sustainability end to end throughout your supply chain. Because sustainability to me is not just checking if your supplier has their accreditations and doesn't partake in modern slavery. That's just tick box nonsense to me. That sustainability for me goes, if I think about my work at AB Sports Nutrition, we went to a procurement conference with the wider group, and Primark is owned by AB World Foods, and Primark is a fast fashion brand, right? It's really problematic in terms of the fast fashion space. They manufacture at scale, en masse, and the product that they put out, although it's better now, back in the day was in landfill, majority of the time by the end of that product life cycle. Now, the initiatives that they had, although they were a fast fashion brand, looking at their supply chain in terms of the silk production in the farmlands that they were sourcing from, setting up schools and making sure there was efficient water and educational facilities. That for me is true supply chain sustainability. It goes right back to the root of where we are sourcing from, because as procurement, we talk about people, planet, and profit. Profit's at the bottom of that list, in my view. People and planet are at the top. People are, in terms of our supply chain, what makes it go round. If we don't look after those people, we can't hope to sustain that supply chain. So it's absolutely fundamental. And then that loops into the planet. I think initially, in terms of sustainability, it was a tick box exercise. And now it's come to a point where procurement are, not just pushing it from a procurement standpoint because we need to be sustainable, but now you've got the consumer demanding more sustainable product. Like, that's been a massive thing. That's been a huge demand in the last sort of five, I'd say even 5 years, not even 10 years. I'd say it's really new, that consumers are demanding more sustainable product. And then you've got, the procurement side of things, and then you've also got the government regulations coming in, putting pressure on businesses for that sustainability piece. So it's a great place to be. I think people are concerned because that ESG side of things, in terms of measuring it within a business, some businesses aren't ready to measure their ESG because they're not mature enough to deliver on those kind of metrics. But it's great that it's not just coming from procurement, it's coming from consumers and the government now. That sustainability needs to be at the forefront. So sustainability is a big thing. As procurement people, we should care. We really should care. And that's one of the big things, I think, which I love about procurement. Even though I've worked in automotives, I've worked in sports nutrition, I also worked in health and social care for the government. And all of that is centred around people and, how the world goes round. And you really, as a procurement professional, have to have a curiosity, and you need to care about the impact your work has on the wider environment and the economy.
I think we all have a responsibility to this one. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
we all have this. You actually use the terms transactional and strategic, and early on in your career, this is something that you experienced. And how would you best describe the difference between a transactional versus strategic procurement function? And what are the biggest bottlenecks that you've seen in a transactional procurement function?
Tactical functions, generally speaking, I've been on both sides of the coin. Tactical generally are sort of cost first, and there's a lack of sort of accurate data. There may be a plethora of data, but it might not be accurate. One of the things that's just like a pain point later down the line when you try and integrate automation and AI or anything digital is like, you've got all this data and you think, oh crap, it's not even accurate. And there's no real time due to lack of process and policy, which, really should be used as a guide. I think a lot of people, and I've been guilty of it in the past, hands up, I've, integrating policy and process, holding on to it for dear life, thinking it's going to make things better, when really it should be a guide, not just for you, but for your team and also the wider business. And so having a lack of that and no time really to implement that can really have an impact. And I think tactical functions, I use these phrases as kind of edgy asleep buying. It's last minute stuff, firefighting, and it turns into a little bit of the Wild West eventually if it carries on like that. You get a lot of maverick spend, and it's just difficult to tidy up if you then want to move into a sort of strategic place. And I think as a result, you don't have any time. And also there's a lack of curiosity when you're in that fight or flight mode. You don't have time to think about, can we look strategically at this? Who are our vendors? How are they performing? What contracts have we got coming up? You just don't have time. So it means that curiosity, which is so fundamental, I think, for procurement and supply chain professionals, just gets parked. Nothing's ever perfect. And I think I'll say that even if you're in a strategic function, nothing is perfect. But you get that cross-functionality between the policy and the process working well with the P2P, and then you can focus on the strategy because, the background noise is muted to some degree. And that's really when, data, if it's accurate to an extent, can then be pushed into AI or digital transformation. And that's when it really gets exciting, because then you can actually look for opportunities, risk, and sometimes hidden costs, things that you wouldn't necessarily have picked up in a shorter space of time because it would have taken you another 2 weeks to go through all of that data manually. So it just enables strategic mindset and workflows to embed into procurement and the wider business functions.
We have the words tech, AI, transformation, all these words thrown around, but digital transformation still needs humans at its center, and I think a lot of organizations forget this. So what are your thoughts really on the human element?
You've got no chance in hell of integrating something if you haven't spoken to your people about it first. And I think sometimes, procurement people can be guilty of this, but I think businesses in general, sort of C-suite and, leadership roles, they tend to be guilty of thinking that something's going to fix all their problems and just buying it, implementing it, and not really worrying about the impact on the front line in terms of operational efficiency. And I think it's so funny because upstream tend to over-engineer things quite a lot in my experience, and I feel like it's a panic from leadership to control as much as they can, so they over-engineer so many processes that actually the bottlenecks it creates downstream cause a massive impact in terms of operational efficiency, cost, and the time it takes. So integrating these processes and these technologies, you really need to talk to your people first. Go out and speak to the engineers in the field. Go and speak to the people that are delivering the health and social care services to your end user. Go and speak to the people that are buying your products or making the products in the factory. Find out what their problems are upstream and work backwards. I like to look at a workflow from start to finish, and I've done that at every business I've gone to. I've looked at the start and the finish and looked at the process and gone, that's really not actually very helpful. We're over-engineering things. We're making people's lives harder than they need to be. You need to get their buy-in first and foremost. So talk to them about what the widest business problems are. Put them all down, talk again about it, and collaborate on areas where you can improve. Does it need a whole system integration? Does it need AI? Does it need digital transformation? Is it something which you can re-engineer yourselves initially? If not, then look at a tool which collectively you agree is going to address all of the areas, not just from a procurement standpoint, but from an operational perspective, finance, legal even, some of these things, they all blend into each other. So I think it's fundamental that you engage your stakeholders as soon as possible, because if you integrate something that works for you, great, but 5 minutes later you're going to have everybody emailing you saying, you're causing me a headache, we need to get rid of it, and you've spent a load of money for something that doesn't work. And I think a lot of companies, where I've networked and spoken to people, but also companies that I've worked for, there is an oversaturation of products in the market and also systems that companies use. So you go out to market not really knowing what you need. It probably ticks 2 or 3 of the boxes, but actually, does it feed into your other systems? Does it track your spend? Does it cultivate all your CRM information as well? And often the answer is no. You've got 5 or 6 different systems doing different things, all tracking different metrics and deliverables, and none of them are actually talking to each other, which again, when you come to then try and blend those systems together, can be really difficult. The key thing with people is you need to get their trust that what you're doing is going to benefit them. You need to get their trust that it's not going to inhibit the way that they work, and it's going to actually accelerate the way that they work. And I think the other side of things is implementing that change in the first place is not something that's going to happen overnight. I think managing expectations when it comes to system integration is fundamental. It's not going to happen overnight, and there will be glitches along the way. There will be teething issues. And I think it's just being really honest and upfront about those milestones as you go through those changes, and understanding that people's feelings will change from, yeah, this sounds great, to, oh, I absolutely hate this and I feel really demotivated, and then you'll come out the other side. But perseverance, I think, with that is quite key.
Do you think there's an educational problem where people are still problem unaware about how these solutions can help? Or maybe we're just comfortable with how we've been working?
It depends. It depends on the business, to be honest. I mean, I think some businesses, like startups and that kind of thing, are really entrepreneurial, and they really thrive on kind of looking for new solutions and embracing change and new systems and that kind of thing. Businesses that have done the same old thing for a while, that's the real challenge. And I think there's definitely an educational gap in terms of tech offerings, and I think that's mainly because procurement have only really started looking for tech for procurement recently. That market has exploded recently, and there are so many offerings out there when it comes to supplier management, risk mitigation, commodity markets and insights, P2P, contract management, even negotiation. There are so many offerings out there, and I think it really is time for procurement people to be brave in terms of looking for those opportunities. Now, what I will say is that yes, there are loads of offerings, but it's very, very saturated in the market. It could be really difficult to navigate what the right tech solution would be for your company. But it's so funny because procurement people are so good at finding other solutions for other people, and we're really rigorous. We look at the large market and we go to town on it, and we'll find the right thing. But when we look, inwards and we go, what do we actually want? What do we need? That's a difficult question to answer. And I think it's usually when tech is trying to be integrated too early on, we're trying to jump ahead when we haven't necessarily got everything that we need. And that's, people that are engaged with procurement in the first place, the right data, the right suppliers, and all of those kinds of things. That whole ecosystem needs to be very well balanced before you can start thinking about integrating tech. Playing devil's advocate, if companies don't start integrating tech, they're going to fall behind. So it's a catch-22, isn't it? So yeah, it's a difficult one, actually.
Yeah, no, it is. But I think the only way to stay competitive is to evolve with technologies. Yeah.
I just encourage procurement professionals to get out there as much as possible. In terms of, work and networking opportunities, I say yes to everything, because you never know what you're going to learn. There's so much to be learned. I don't think any procurement or supply chain professional can say that they've learned everything that there is to know. It's constantly evolving, and the network that you meet as a result of that is fantastic. I mean, the event that you guys hosted was incredible, and it was really good just to be around like-minded professionals. And when you talk to these people, you realise you've got a lot of shared interests, a lot of shared issues in terms of, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and you'll find clues and answers, and you'll, be able to leverage each other's knowledge and experience and platforms to help make the wider procurement space a lot better, which is what we're all here for, right?
And for my final question, what excites you most about the future of procurement?
In terms of AI and digital transformation, it's probably going to blow up in terms of our capabilities. I think we've not really seen our full capability as a result of that integration, and that's really, really exciting. And I think it will also change the way that we think. With the help of those systems, how are we going to think moving forward? What value we're going to be able to add as a result of that kind of being taken care of? What are the limits, or are there any limits to how we can progress? So I say that's one area which I'm super excited about. And the other side of things is, I think, is just there's a new generation of procurement coming up through the ranks, which is super exciting. I'm part of that, but so I'm a bit biased. But I see a lot of incredible procurement people coming through their career and doing some really incredible work. And I think as the years go on, procurement people are setting the standard more and more as to what's acceptable, pushing the boundaries and making sure that we are working with best practice at the forefront as much as possible. Procurement's going to come on leaps and bounds. We saw it in COVID when it came through, and people went, oh my God, what's supply chain? And it actually makes the world go round. So I think we've really come a long way from that space, and businesses more and more are starting to see our potential. And I think that will grow a lot more over the sort of next 10 to 20 years, which is exciting. So we'll see.
We will. And that's a wrap for our conversation with Courtney. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Dana.